Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, we are going to be breaking down the Monday, December 2nd slate of college basketball DFS. That is right, Feast Week is finally over, which is kind of bittersweet because, like, on the bright side, it was a really good Feast Week for us. We won the bank shot on FanDuel twice. On the Sunday slate today, I did kind of an abbreviated version of my normal process because I was preparing for NFL games and I was able to win both the quarter jukebox and the dime time. And I wish I was able to, play contests that had higher entry fees, but it is what it is. I'll take the highly positive day any way I can get them. So it was a good Feast Week. But Feast Week is exhausting because you have multiple college basketball slates. We got college football going on every day. We got NFL going on seemingly every day. So, it was a lot going on for Feast Week. And now it's kind of like everything's settling and we're going to kind of get into our normal routine, right? And that starts here with this Monday slate. We've got what I call a mid-major Monday slate where we've got a lot of teams that we don't usually see on the DraftKings slate. So we're going to cover a lot of information that you might not have heard about some of these teams. We're going to break down all 5 games and tell you what you can expect from each game, as well as who needs to be in your DFS lineups on DraftKings for each of those 5 games. Now, like I said, with Feast Week being over, with the college football regular season being over, you can expect more regular college basketball content from us. So make sure you are subscribed to channel so that we can be with us all the way up until the Final Four. But also, I will caution, I am approaching my busy season. I've mentioned here on the podcast how I am a high school teacher and coach. Right now, I'm coaching girls flag football and varsity boys basketball. The girls flag football team, we are playing in our playoff tournament this coming Saturday, and then that season will be over. But the basketball season is just starting, so I'm going to be having 2 nights a week where I'm pretty much not going to be able to record when we have a late game. So, you can expect the college basketball content regularly, but just know that if one drops, or one's not there, it's because I've got other stuff going on. And there are other ways to get in contact with me if you want my information from those slates that I don't have an episode for. We're going to talk about that later. So anyway, let's go ahead and get started. We're 2 minutes in on the intro, which is too long, but I feel like we had a lot we needed to cover. So anyway, let's go ahead and dive in. We got 5 games to break down, and the first 2 are the most interesting ones. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so in game number 1, we've kind of got a little DMV showdown between UMBC, which is the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, and Georgetown, which is in Washington, D.C. I know geography, y'all. So anyway, this is an interesting game. KenPom has this one projected to be 85-71 in favor of Georgetown. That is a game total of 156 points. That makes Georgetown the highest team total on the slate. So you're definitely going to want to get some pieces of that Georgetown team. And this game in general has the second highest game total on the slate. So don't count out the UMBC guys just because they're expected to lose this game by 14, according to the great folks at KenPom. Now, the reason why Georgetown has the highest team total is because when you look at the metrics for UMBC, it makes for a very attractive game environment. They rank 54th in the nation in tempo, so it is a pace up spot for Georgetown. But they rank 340th in defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. So this is a matchup where UMBC is going to increase the number of possessions, and they're going to make it easier for you to score on every possession. So there's plenty of opportunity for points to be scored. Now, on the UMBC side, one thing that I think is interesting when you have these early season games, especially these non-conference games like this where the level of competition is not exactly even, is to look at what these guys have done in other similar game environments. And so if you think this game is going to be a blowout, which I think there's a chance that it might be, UMBC has a loss by 49 this season to Penn State. In that game, their starters played their normal minutes. So I would anticipate that even if this game does get out of hand, the UMBC starters are going to be playing their normal allotment of minutes, and they're going to be out there until the very end. That, again, makes them a very attractive team to use. It makes this a very attractive game to stack. Now, who are those starters? Well, the first one is going to be Josh Odonowo. I hope I said that correctly. He is one of their starting forwards. He is their team usage leader, but he plays super inconsistent minutes. Last game against Morgan State, which they won in a blowout, he only played 13 minutes. He did have 3 fouls in those 13 minutes. So, I didn't watch that game. Sorry, I can't watch every single one of the 325 teams in Division I college basketball all the time. So I don't know if he was in foul trouble or not, but 13 minutes in that game is a little alarming. And then you look back earlier in the season, and there's some kind of alarmingly low minute totals. So while this guy is out there, his usage rate is going to be high, which gives him a high ceiling, which he has had this season when he had 36 DraftKings points against, I believe that was Boston University. But he's got a high ceiling, but he's certainly a volatile play. But he is the guy who does lead the team in usage. The guys who you're going to want to target more consistently, though, are going to be Bryce Johnson and Marcus Banks. Both of the two of them have over a 23% usage rate, and both of them have over a 24% shot rate. Just how they rack up their points via in DraftKings is a little bit different. Johnson is a little more of a scorer than anything else. But even then, he's been like super consistent in terms of DraftKings scoring. The last 3 games, he's been over 26 DraftKings points in all of them. but his salary of $8,000, he's really got a high bar to get to. Whereas Banks is slightly cheaper at $7,700, but he is more of a rebounder than anything else. Like, he does put up a lot of point totals as well, but he is a big time rebounder. And so in a game where we're looking for there to be a lot of possessions, I kind of would prefer to play Banks at a slightly cheaper price tag, considering that their rates are pretty similar, and considering that how Banks scores his fantasy points, rebounding is a way that he can certainly get there in a game that's going to feature a lot of possessions. Now, the other two starters are Ace Valentine, who's 5,600 on DraftKings. He had a huge game against Howard, 16, 4 and 7 in that game, which kind of was out of nowhere. So he does have a little bit of a ceiling. He is going to start. He's going to play starters minutes, but not a super consistent player at 5,600. And then you've also got Louis Jordan, who I think is going to be a supremely popular value play on this slate. He's $3,900. He is this team's starting center, and basically you never know what you're going to get with him in terms of minutes. It can certainly vary, but $3,900 for a starter, for a guy who averages over 4x for his salary, and a guy who also has 39 DraftKings points in a game this season, he's going to be a very attractive play at $3,900. I think he's going to be very popular. I will be playing some of him, but not all of him. And one last guy I want to talk about, Devin Sapp. He's priced up higher on DraftKings than I was hoping. He is a supremely high usage player off the bench. So if you do believe that this game gets out of hand, or if you do believe that, maybe somebody on UMBC gets in foul trouble, he would be a guy that is a beneficiary. I think he's a GPP type of play, but his salary really prices him out from being anything that's like super consistent, because like if he was like $3,500, I think he would be like a really solid play. All right, on the Georgetown side, they have a true big four. And what I mean by that is they have four guys who play a ton of minutes, all have north of a 20% shot rate, all have a big usage rate, all put up a ton of DraftKings points. And if this team is going to score 85 points in this game, you can pretty much bet that these big four are all going to have big nights. And it starts with Thomas Sorber. He is their starting power forward. He averages 37 DraftKings points a game, which is well over 4 times value for his salary. And he's had some big games so far this season: 47 against Lehigh, 43 against Fairfield, 40 against Albany. Recurring theme here is that when he's up against slightly weaker competition, which those games were, he had huge games. When he saw better competition against Notre Dame, he only put up 23 DraftKings points. So I think this is the type of environment that you want to play Sorber in, where he can just use his natural talent advantage over the UMBC guys. And really, with UMBC looking to up the pace, I think this is a great spot for him. His 3 biggest DraftKings performances this season, all over 39 DraftKings points, all happened when he put up double-doubles, and it's much more likely to get a double-double when the pace is up. So I really do like Thomas Sorber. Here's a good pay-up option on this slate. Jaden Epps is next up. He was Georgetown's best player last year. He had some huge games last year for Georgetown. What I worry, though, is that now that they've kind of gotten some other actually good offensive players on this team, he doesn't have to carry the load as much as he did last year. And so he's just not putting up the same quality numbers that he is last year. Now, he will still have random big games like he did against St. Peter's when he put up 42 DraftKings points, but it's just not happening as often as it was last year. So I'm not super into Epps here on this slate, but I do acknowledge that he has a high ceiling. And if I am going to play a 20 max, he's probably going to be in one of those 20 just because I know he has these games where he goes off. Micah Peavy is kind of the opposite of Epps. He's kind of like not a super ball dominant player, but he is a stat sheet stuffer. He can put up peripheral stats with the best of them. And in a pace up game, you want guys that can put up peripheral stats. And when you look at what he's done this season, he's been over 4x value for his salary in every game except 2. He's been over 5x value in 3 games, and peaking with a game over 40 and a game over 50 DraftKings points. So I really do think that this is a really good spot for Micah Peavy. I think he's going to be very popular, but I think it's for very good reason. Among the big Georgetown guys, I would probably personally rank it in terms of my likelihood to roster them: Peavy, and then Sorber, and then Epps. Malik Mack, I would have 4th among that group. He's kind of in the same category as Epps, where he was a super ball dominant player last year at Harvard. He doesn't have to carry the load as much this year, though. So what you're going to see from Malik Mack is you're going to see these random games where he has just massive games because he can still be that ball dominant player every now and then, but it's not going to happen as often. So much like with Jaden Epps, he's probably going to make my player pool, but not be a big part of it. The 5th starter is a guy named Drew Fielder. He is a true 7-footer. This is a large man. So he's going to have a size advantage here in this one. But really, he's overpriced for what he's produced so far this season. He doesn't have a game over 20 DraftKings points this season. He's priced up at $5,600. So what you're asking for him to do is to have the game of the season for him just to hit 4x value, or especially the game of the season for him to hit 5x value. It's a tough pill to swallow. He doesn't play a ton of minutes. I do think while he's out there, he has the potential to dominate. I think he's an okay GPP play, but I don't know. I'm not really sold on him. The other guy that I will mention is Jordan Burks. He's the only other player other than the big four that we mentioned, and other than Drew Fielder, who averages more than 16 minutes a game, but not a super consistent producer. If you're looking for like a cash game value play, he might be one of them. Next up, we've got the game of the slate, in my opinion. Yale taking on Rhode Island. KenPom has this one as 81-78 in favor of Rhode Island, which is a high total. You do not see KenPom totals get north of 160 very often, and this one is sitting here at 159, which is the highest game total on the slate. The reason why is that both of these teams have metrics that indicate they're going to be scoring a lot of points. Yale ranks 41st in the nation in offensive efficiency, 219th in defensive efficiency, and 208 in tempo. So yes, they're middle of the road in tempo, but good offense plus bad defense. Meanwhile, you've got Rhode Island, who's 69th in offensive efficiency, 118th in defensive efficiency, and 34th in tempo. So you've got high pace with them, good offense, bad defense. Like, what more can you ask for? This is going to be a game that you're going to want to target. And for the Yale guys, it's a big pace up with Rhode Island ranking 34th in tempo. Now, on the Yale side, they have a very clear big three. And it starts with Nick Townsend. Basically, Bez Mbeng, their point guard, and Nick Townsend, their primary big man, are their two best players, in my opinion, and both have over a 25% usage rate. Townsend is a guy that I like because of the game environment. He averages 6 rebounds, almost 4 assists per game, so he puts up a ton of peripheral stats, and he really can put them up in games that are pace-up spots, right? Like, you look at the last 2 games they played against Delaware, there was 194 points scored in that game, and he put up 39 DraftKings points. In fact, that's the second straight game of 38 DraftKings points or more for Nick Townsend. That's over 6x value for his salary. So this is a guy that is coming in basically on a high, but his price has not been adjusted. He is a really, really good play, in my opinion. He can put up peripheral stats with the best of them. This is a game where there's going to be plenty of peripheral stats to go around, and he's at a super affordable price tag. Bez Mbeng, who we just mentioned, is their point guard. And what's interesting with him is that he's been over 4x value for his salary this season in every single game but one, and that was a game against Minnesota, and he fouled out of that game. And if you've watched Minnesota play this season, Minnesota doesn't play basketball games. Minnesota plays rock fights. And so I can really forgive him for that. He's been over 25 DraftKings points in every other game. He is not the most shot-happy guy, but he is dependent on rebounds and assists in order to hit value. And again, in a pace-up spot with a lot of scoring, there's going to be a lot of rebounds and assists to go around, so I think Mbeng makes a lot of sense to play. And then you've got the guy that some would say is their best player, which is Poulikitis. I think there's a distinction, though, between best player and best scorer. Poulikitis is certainly their best scorer. He has over a 31% shot rate on the season. He scored over 18 real points in every game so far this season, which means he's scored over 25 DraftKings points in every game so far this season. So personally, I would rather play the guys in this type of game environment that are going to put up peripheral stats like Townsend and Mbeng than Poulikitis, but there's still a chance that Poulikitis can just go out there and drop 30. So, like, it's kind of like if you played last year, or if you remember me talking last year about AJ Storr when he was on Wisconsin, where AJ Storr never put up peripheral stats. All he did was score. But when he would get in these game environments where randomly he puts up 7 rebounds and 6 assists, or randomly he puts up 9 boards, right? Like, he would just break a slate because the scoring was still there and he increased his peripheral stats. So I certainly see the argument towards playing Poulikitis, because in a pace-up game, there is a chance that he could get a ton of peripheral stats. But my preference would go to the guys in Townsend and Mbeng that I know have been there and done it before. Poulikitis is certainly still going to make my player pool, though. This guy's a gunner. He's probably going to take 15 or more shots in this game. And anytime you have a guy like that at $5,900, you got to roster him. Now, after that, Yassine Garam and Samson Alaton are the other 2 starters. I don't really have that much to say about him, though, other than when you're looking for value plays, I would prefer to play a value play from one of the best game environments of the slate with guys that I know are going to play decent minutes. And these guys do play decent minutes. Like, they're not out there for like 35 minutes a game like Townsend and Mbeng and Poulikitis are, but they're out there quite a bit. They're very cheap. They're affordable. They're certainly reasonable value plays, in my opinion. The other 2 guys that play a lot off the bench are Seliskar and Simmons, but their pathways are a little narrower than Garam and Alaton, just because they generally don't play as many minutes. They generally don't take as many shots. Now, on the Rhode Island side, the Fighting Archie Millers are led by Sebastian Thomas, who is their best player, minutes leader, usage leader, starting point guard, averages 8 assists a game. And in a game where you're going to be going up against Yale, who is not a good defensive team, playing the assist leader is going to make a lot of sense, because if other guys are scoring, he's going to be racking up assists. And Sebastian Thomas, to me, makes a lot of sense. He's been over 31 DraftKings points in every single game so far, which is well over 4x value for his salary. Love him as a play, going to be playing him a ton, but I think a lot of other people are as well. This is no secret. He's going to be popular. So what I am going to look to do is to try to figure out my best way where I can stack him with other pieces on the Yale side or other pieces on the Rhode Island side that can make me a little bit different, or find the right combination of guys in this game environment that could absolutely go nuclear. Now, David Green is Rhode Island's probably second best player. He was their best player last year. I do remember last year the Rhode Island fans getting real happy when he got eligible, and he kind of turned their season around a little bit. They weren't like a total bottom feeder in the A10 after he came aboard, and he's pretty solid, right? Like, he is their leader in shot rate. He is going to put up a lot of shots. His rebounds with him can be inconsistent, but he does average over 5 boards a game. He has shown the ability to hit 4x value for his salary. He has 3 games over 30 DraftKings points this season. So I think he's a decent play. I don't think he's as good of a play mathematically as the other guys in this game that we've talked about, but that probably just means that he's going to have less ownership. And so if you're looking for somebody to stack Thomas with, I think Green is a pretty solid option at a reasonable salary at depressed ownership. You've also got Jamarcus Lawrence, who is a Nebraska transfer who has 2 games this season over 32 DraftKings points. He's arguably overpriced for what his whole body of work over the season is, but at the same time, he has shown us a legitimate ceiling. He is a power forward transfer who transferred down. There's certainly talent there. I'm certainly going to have some lineups where I get to him a little bit. After that, you've got Tyrone Farrell, who starts on the wing, but Jaden House plays more minutes than him. So I would personally prefer to play House over Farrell. And then you've also got Javonte Brown, who is their starting center. Doesn't ever play a big minute total, though. But if there was a game where you're going to put up a lot of DraftKings points and not a lot of minutes, this could be one of them when the pace is going to be going up and down. But personally, I would prefer to not target that situation. The backup center is a guy named David. I'm not going to say his last name. If you're watching live on YouTube, you can probably see why. He is okay. He's the backup center. I think he's overpriced on DraftKings. If he was in the 4K range, he would make my player pool. All right, next up, we are going to take a quick break, and then we're going to go over these next 3 games. Now, before we continue, I do want to mention there are places where you can get more information from me. First off, you can follow me on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm more than happy to answer any questions that you have for me if you reach out to me on Twitter. I know that I record some of these shows pretty well in advance as well. So, sometimes we get injury updates or, things change or something like that. Feel free to reach out to me and ask a question. I'm more than happy to share my thoughts. I also tweet out all updates for the show as well. So if you want to stay in the loop with what's going on, follow me on Twitter. I'm also in the Fantasy Corner Discord. The link is in the description on YouTube as well as on the audio feed. If you are looking for a community to be a part of, it's 100% free. It has a lot of really smart, really good, and sometimes really funny people to talk DFS with. The Fantasy Corner Discord is the place for you. We've got all sports covered in there, not just college basketball, college football, NFL, NBA, MLB. And basically, we got people in there all day long. They're just talking about lineups, talking about plays, talking about strategies, and then sweating it out together. If you're just looking for people to talk DFS with, I cannot recommend it enough. And then lastly, if you want to know who actually makes my lineups after all these videos, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. I am basically posting my lineups or my core plays for every single college basketball slate. Now, sometimes I can't always get the full write-up, but most of the time I do get a full write-up in terms of why they're my core plays. So you can get not only the plays themselves, but why they are from somebody who understands the game theory of DFS and somebody who understands the X's and O's of college basketball. So if you're looking to up your college basketball DFS game, that is a place to go. I can't promise that you're just going to sit here and print money from playing those plays. It's not that easy. But what I can promise is you can get some information that is going to help you get better at your process for playing DFS. All right, that does it for where else you can find me. Let's go ahead and move on to game number 3, which is a contrast of styles. We do have 2 low major teams, but they are going to play entirely different ways. We've got Bryant at Drexel. KenPom has this one being 76-73 in favor of the Drexel Dragons. That is a game total of 149 points, which is middle of the road here on this slate. That is the 3rd highest total. And the reason why is because these 2 teams, they rank at polar opposites in terms of tempo. Bryant ranks 11th in the nation in tempo. Drexel ranks 347th. However, it is still fairly early in the season. So you could see those tempo numbers like switch up drastically based off of like a few more games, because sometimes it is a little bit dependent on your opponent, because it is an adjusted tempo rating. So it does take your opponent into account for a second. But like, if you play a game against like a Seton Hall or VCU who's just going to slow the game down to a screeching halt, then your tempo rating is probably going to go down because of it. So I definitely think that the tempo ratings are pretty good to use, but right now they're not like gospel, because I do think that one of these team styles is going to take over this game, and you might not necessarily see it be the team that's the slower team, if that makes sense. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about Bryant. So Bryant has a guy named Raphael Pinzon. He is their usage leader. He is like a 6-7 point forward. He takes a ton of shots. He is not very efficient from the field. It is why he is only $6,300 on DraftKings. But this is a guy who's going to have the ball in his hands quite a ton. He can fill up a stat sheet. He does get a decent amount of rebounds and assists. He's going to have the ball in his hands all the time. So I don't think he is a bad option at $6,300. But with it being a potential pace down spot, I'm certainly a little bit raised awareness in terms of playing him. Now, the other guy we got to talk about is Earl Timberlake. He is second on the team in usage, right? But he is much more efficient. He records much more peripheral stats than Raphael Pinzon does. But he's priced up to a point that makes it really hard to play him. He averages 32 DraftKings points a game, which is great. But, priced at $8,700, we're going to need more like 35 DraftKings points to hit 4x value, and that's just 4x value. If you want more like 5x, that's even more. And he's only hit 4x value 2 times this season. That is not great. It's not. Like, honestly, if you were, and plus you have a pace down spot. So like if he were priced at $7,700, not $8,700, I'd be super interested. But he really is a lot. To me, the only way you would play him is to be contrarian from the other pay up options, because I think he will be one of the least popular ones. And you're just assuming that this game environment doesn't end up being terrible. So to me, I think he's an interesting GPP leverage play, but nothing more than that. Now, after that, they do have 2 guys, Evans and Withers, who play a ton of minutes, but at lower usage rates. Now, their DraftKings points per game looks pretty good, but they've kind of been inconsistent, and they're kind of propped up by some of the games early in the season where Bryant was really beating up on folks. So I don't really know what to make of them, but I do know this is a pace down spot, and so you cannot really expect their normal production here in this pace down spot. However, Barry Evans, $5,700, that's his production at that price tag is hard to ignore. So I think he's going to be super chalky. I don't necessarily think he's the best play on the slate because of the pace up spot, because of the inconsistencies in what he's done. But I definitely think he's a guy that's got to be in your player pool. And I think that in college basketball DFS, sometimes you have to play the chalky guys, just because if they do hit, you're going to be screwed if you don't have them in your lineup. So he's a guy that I'm probably going to have in my pool, but not be a core play. But like I said, I do think he's going to be very popular. Now, after those 2 guys, they do have Keyshawn Mitchell, who is the starter at center, but Kevon Kramer actually plays more minutes at the 5 than him. So not really super interested in either of those 2 guys, given that they're going to be splitting minutes. And then really, I'm not super interested in playing a whole lot of value plays from this game, given that it's going to be, middle of the road game environment. Now, on the Drexel side, this is a big pace up for spot for Drexel. So if you are looking to, kind of catch some guys on the upswing, the Drexel team will be one to target, because they're probably going to see more possessions in this game than they usually do. Now, what's super interesting for them is that they've got a guy, Josh Reed, who is down here at $3,000. He is a normally decent part of the rotation. He did not play in their last game. And what they did was basically, without him in the rotation, they basically reduced it to a 6-man rotation for this team. So you know who's going to play all the minutes. Cole Hargrove only plays with a 20% usage rate, but he is an absolute rebounding machine. He has 3 double-doubles on the season. And really, we kind of bit on this recurring theme here. It's in a pace-up spot. More possessions means more rebounds. So I don't think he's a terrible play, $8,600, even though I do think he's a little overpriced. But after that, the guys that are going to see the ball in their hands more so than him, because he's really just a rebounder, are going to be McGee, Butler, Drake, and Blakeney. All 4 of those guys, all of whom are priced somewhere between $8,000 and $5,800, all of them have between a 21 and 22% usage rate and between a 21 and 22% shot rate, which is really uncanny. It means that these 4 guys are the guys that are really generating all of the offense for this team. Now, in terms of a DraftKings perspective, McGee is probably the best of them, especially considering he is the best rebounder of the group. That is why he is the most expensive one. And he has shown us a legitimate ceiling this season when he put up 48 DraftKings points against Colgate. And we know this is a pace-up spot. I don't think this is a bad spot for McGee, but like I said, all these other guys have very similar rates. So all these other guys are going to make my player pool as well. Butler is a slightly worse points per dollar play, in my opinion. But this guy's going to play a ton of minutes. He's probably going to get double-digit shots. He's a little more inconsistent than McGee, but I think he's worth a look at $6,500. And then you have Blakeney, who is not as efficient as the other two, doesn't play as many minutes as the other two, but does have games in the game log where he's put up well over 4x value. And then you have Drake, who comes off the bench. He is not a starter, but he's had big games off the bench. And so I think he's worth a look as well. I don't mind the idea of playing these Drexel guys because of the fact that it is a pace up. Now, the last guy I'm going to talk about for Drexel is Victor Panov. He does start at the 4, plays around 23-ish minutes a game. Within that game without Josh Reed, he played 27. $5,500 is not the best price tag for him. I would much prefer him to be cheaper if I wanted to play him on DraftKings. Next up, we've got Pacific taking on Colorado. This is probably the ugliest game of the slate. This is the lowest game total of the slate. KenPom has it as 78-62 in favor of Colorado. That is a game total of 140 points. Now, there is one piece of good news with Pacific. We have seen games this season where they have gotten blown out. They've lost some big games to some good teams. And what we've seen in that game is that their big 3 guys, Ralph, Fisher, and Washington, will all play big minutes in those blowout losses, which is good news. It means they're still playable here in this one. Now, Elias Ralph is the guy who is priced up the most on the DraftKings board. And when you look at his stats, he has shown the ability to get home in a blowout loss. 32 DraftKings points against Arkansas, 37 against Missouri. He's got a chance to get there, right? Like, he's going to play a ton of minutes. He's a really good rebounder. He has a chance to get a double-double. I do think that there is a world where he does end up giving you a solid GPP score. Now, Elijah Fisher and Lamar Washington, ironically, are both transfers from Texas Tech. Fisher is a little more of a scorer. So I think he's less likely to give value than Washington is, personally, because then when you go look at Washington is much more of an assist guy and a rebound guy, for that matter. He averages over 4 boards a game and exactly 7 assists a game. And so what you see is, the Arkansas game that he played, 32 DraftKings points in that game, and that was a game they lost by 19 because they scored 72 points. He was able to put up 5 assists. It definitely gave him an advantage, right? The Missouri game where they only scored 56, he only had 15.5 DraftKings points. So I do like Washington in this one because I don't think Colorado is necessarily going to shut him out. And I do think that if Pacific is able to keep this one close, then it's probably going to be because of Lamar Washington. Now, the only other guys that we need to mention are Koulibaly. He left last game early, only played 7 minutes. Now, granted, I don't know what happened. I can't find anything on this on Twitter. This is a guy that normally starts, and he only played 7 minutes. I don't know what went down. He did have 4 fouls, but I don't know if he got hurt, got ejected, got 2 technicals, whatever. I don't know what happened, but he only played 7 minutes. I don't know what his status is for this game. In that game with him going out, what you saw was Peter Krivokapic, I think is how you pronounce it. He played 33 minutes. He basically took all the Koulibaly minutes. He put up 20 DraftKings points in that game because he was able to grab 12 rebounds. I would certainly be interested in him, but I would really want confirmation that Koulibaly is going to be out. But I don't know if Koulibaly is going to be out, so it makes it a really hard situation to target. And then Jazz Gardner is their 5th starter. He is a Nevada transfer who randomly had like 3 big games so far this season. So if you're playing GPPs, I think he's got to be in your player pool just because what if he just randomly has a big game again? I think there's a chance. So he's going to make my player pool, but he's not going to be a big part of it. On the Colorado side, they went to Maui and they went 1-2. And this is interesting because what you're seeing is the guys on this team in Maui are going opposite directions, right? So really what happened in Maui was you're seeing a stock increase for Andre Jakimovsky as well as Julian Hammond. And then you're kind of seeing the other guys go the opposite direction. So let's go ahead and start with them. Jakimovsky is a transfer from Washington State. He is a long and lengthy small/power forward who is probably going to lead the team in shots, probably going to lead the team in scoring. And he does have the ability to put up DraftKings points in a variety of ways. He's generally a pretty good rebounder. Julian Hammond is now running the point. He is the team's usage leader now. In Maui, he put up over 24 DraftKings points in every game. And I think that that's a pretty good formula for him. He was actually 6 of 11 shooting in every game. That's uncanny. But I'm going to be going back to him because I do think I'm a believer in his usage rate. I'm a believer in how this team uses him. And I think that he is going to continue to see solid usage. And $5,700 is too cheap. Now, what you also saw in Maui was Trevor Baskin moved into the starting lineup, but didn't do a whole lot with it. This was a guy that was actually playing better from a DraftKings perspective when he was coming off the bench. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. The minute totals don't really change a whole lot, but for whatever reason, when he moved into the starting lineup, he has not put up over 21 DraftKings points since moving into the starting lineup. However, the level of competition that Colorado was playing was certainly different in Maui than what they're normally used to from their previous non-conference games. So, maybe he is just a bottom feeder, a weak team hunter. Like he could be that. And so I'm certainly going to have him in the pool, but I don't think he's going to be a big part of it. And then you also have Elijah Malone, who is their starting center. In Maui, he had kind of a rough go of it, 22, 20, and 3 DraftKings points. Not super duper interested, but the usage rate is pretty solid. He's at 25% on the season. I don't really know what to make of it. I'm kind of like Baskin being in the starting lineup really kind of threw everything for a loop, and it definitely messed those two guys up from what they had been doing. Javon Ruffin also was moved to the bench when Baskin was, starting, and Ruffin did not put up over 15 DraftKings points in a game in Maui. However, if this game does turn into a blowout, I think it would be quite likely that they would try to get him on track. And so I think it will be quite likely that he would put up a much better DraftKings total than what you saw in Maui. After that, they do play RJ Smith quite a bit, but he's not that interesting to me. They will play Bangot Dak quite a bit, but he's not that interesting to me. He actually usually starts for this team, but I'm just not that interested. So I'm probably not going to play anybody on this Colorado side outside of Jakimovsky and Hammond, and maybe taking a few shots at Malone, Basket, and Ruffin. All right, last game of the night is going to be another contrast of styles, Washington State taking on Nevada. Now, KenPom has this one being 79-67 in favor of Nevada. That is a total of 146 points. And again, this is a contrast of styles. Nevada currently ranks 340th in tempo, whereas Wazoo ranks 42nd. However, the interesting part is that when you look at Nevada, how much is their opponent playing into this tempo rating, right? Because they played VCU, they played Vanderbilt, they played Santa Clara, they played Washington. Like, they played teams that will look to slow the game down against you. And so I don't know if that tempo rating is necessarily the best to go by, because you look at their game against Oklahoma State, that's a team that likes to play at a fast tempo. There was 168 total points scored in that game. So it seems like Nevada is totally content to play at the tempo of their opponent, which to me makes this game a chance to go higher than the projected total of 146. Anyway, let's go ahead and talk about Wazoo. So Cedric Coward is one of their best players, and he missed their game against Fresno State. Apparently, he's got a shoulder injury, and apparently he's going to be out indefinitely. Don't exactly know what that means, but I do know that if he is out, what you're going to see is a huge usage boost to Nate Calmes, who is already the team's leader in usage. And in the games that Coward has been out, he's missed the last 2. Calmes has put up 38 and 31 DraftKings points. I think this is a really solid spot for him. Like I said, I think the pace down can be concerning, but I don't know necessarily if it is going to end up being a pace down game. But he's at a really solid price point with really solid rates, really solid performances. Cannot say enough about how Nate Calmes is a really good play on this slate. After him, Isaiah Watts became the other starting guard. And what you've seen from Isaiah Watts, the last 2 years, he's been this energy guy off the bench. He's a guy that I would advocate for last year. Every time Washington State was on the slate, play him in your GPP lineups, because there's going to be times where he comes in and plays more minutes than expected and just puts the ball in the bucket, right? Well, now he's playing a lot of minutes. He's played over 30 minutes in his last 3. He's put up over 27 DraftKings points in his last 3. If Coward continues to be out, which I expect him to be, then Watts is going to be the premier value play on this slate, and he's going to be one of the most popular value plays on the slate. But I think this is a guy that I'm going to be getting in my lineups because, we've said for years he has GPP upside. Well, now he's seeing the minute totals. Now he's seeing the usage. Like, he's got the role. This is a guy that is not appropriately priced if Coward is out. After that, at the forward spots, they really don't play a whole lot of bench minutes on this team, y'all. You've got Watts, Price, and Eric Strupp. who all play the forward spot. Watts is pretty solid, but like I think he's overpriced. I think $8,500 is a little expensive for him, and Nevada's got a pretty solid front court. So I don't necessarily, I'm not super intrigued to target him. Price and Eric Stubb, I think Price is personally overpriced. I don't know why he's priced ahead of Eric Stubb, who's at $5,400 and has a much more palatable price tag. Eric Stubb has been a little more inconsistent, but as long as he can stay out of foul trouble, he is going to be on the floor and he's going to be really good. But the question is if he can stay out of foul trouble against this Nevada front line. Ndie Okafor is the primary bench big that they have. And then at the guard spot, Watts was their primary guard off the bench. So give me 1 second. Let me take a look at the last game's box score. Case Wynot, it would be their primary guard off the bench. And he played 22 minutes in their game against SMU, only put up 6 DraftKings points. Not exactly a stamp of approval, but if you're looking for a guy, way down low in price tag who maybe could give you something, he would be a guy at 3,100 you could get to. On the Nevada side, it's pretty simple. There's really just 3 guys that I want to target, and it's so weird how they're priced. So Nevada, last year they had the guards, they had Blackshear, they had the other guy, I think Lucas was his name. But they still had these bigs, Davidson and Coleman. And this year, they've still got the 2 bigs, Davidson and Coleman. Davidson is very reasonably priced at $8,200. He has put up over 27 DraftKings points in every single game with a ceiling of 52. This is a pace-up spot. This is a Washington State big rotation that has the potential to foul. And then Davidson is also a double-double threat, especially if we do have a pace-up game. So I like Nick Davidson a lot at $8,200. Trey Coleman is the other big that I was talking about. I like him a lot at $5,200. I don't necessarily know if I would play the both of them together because Coleman is certainly more dependent on peripheral stats, particularly assists. He's averaging over 4 assists so far this season. But I don't know. I don't know if I would play both of them together, but I do like both of them as individual plays. I also really like Kobe Sanders at guard. So Kobe Sanders is a transfer from some really small school. In fact, I'm going to look it up as I'm talking here. Cal Poly is where he transferred from. And he's been really good since he got to Nevada, like really, really good. He's been their best offensive player. He leads them in usage rate over 24%, over 23% shot rate. And he's shown a legitimately really high ceiling this year, 3 games over 36 DraftKings points. He is going to be very popular for good reason because he's in a pace-up spot with a really good matchup with really good rates. He's one of my favorite plays on the slate in this 7K range. After that, I got to be honest, I'm not super duper interested. Ducell is a Wyoming transfer who starts but doesn't really do a whole lot. But it is a pace-up game, so he's going to have more opportunities. And then the other starter is Brandon Love, who, again, is a starter. He does a little more than Ducell does. His game log is a little more consistent, but I don't know. I think Love might be worth like a game stacking piece, but I'm not super interested other than that. And then there's not really anybody else who plays a ton of minutes off the bench. Tyler Rollison would be the leader in minutes off the bench, but he's kind of up and down. You don't really know what you're going to get from him. $4,100 is not a super expensive price tag to pay. And then Justin McBride does play with a super high usage rate when he's out there, but he would need foul trouble from Coleman or Davidson in order to see a lot of minutes. All right, that is going to do it for the 5-game Monday DraftKings slate. Hopefully we gave you guys all the information you need in order to build some winning lineups here on this Monday DraftKings slate. If this video helped you out in any way, please hit the like button on YouTube. Please rate and review the audio. It helps me out a ton when you guys do that. I cannot stress that enough. But other than that, that's all we got for this episode. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. That way you can be with us for the rest of our college basketball content for the rest of the season, as well as all of our college football content all the way through bowl season. But after college football is over, we're pretty much just going to be a college basketball show, y'all. Probably still going to do the golf content every week once golf returns, but really going to be primarily a college basketball show. So make sure you're subscribed now. Make sure if you want the core plays on the Patreon, go get that now. If you want to join the Fantasy Corner Discord, go do that now so that we can be with us for the rest of the season. But anyway, that's going to do it here, y'all. Hopefully we gave you guys the goods, everything that you need in order to build some winning lineups here on Monday. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. Best of luck to you guys on the Monday slate, and I will see you guys next time.